Attention. Mandibles shut, eye stalks forward. The voice of Commander Vrex K boomed through the briefing chamber of the GSV Inevitable Cultural Misunderstanding, causing the assembled Quarzian Marines to snap to attention. Their chitinous exoskeletons clicked as they formed perfect rows, each Marine standing at precisely the same height, a trait that had made the Quarzians excellent candidates for intergalactic peacekeeping operations. Commander Vrex K's secondary breathing sacs inflated with importance as he activated the holographic display. Today, soldiers, we begin a new chapter in Galactic Alliance history. For the first time, our elite squad will be conducting a joint operation with humans. A collective murmur rippled through the assembly, followed by the nervous clicking of mandibles. Yes, I can hear your concern, Vrex K continued, his voice dripping with what passed for sarcasm in Quarzian culture, which meant his words were accompanied by the faint smell of overripe fruit. We've all heard the stories. Deathworlders, persistence predators, beings who evolved on a planet that seems designed specifically to kill them. But the Alliance Command believes this experiment will strengthen interspecies relations. Lieutenant Z-Pox raised a claw. Commander, is it true they're filled with acid? Not exactly, Lieutenant said Science Officer Next Tier, gliding forward on her hover pad. Next Tier belonged to the gelatinous bloboid species and had 7 doctorates in xenobiology. Humans contain various acids, but they're mostly contained within specialized internal organs. The real concern is their skeleton. She activated a detailed anatomical hologram of a human. The assembled Marines recoiled. By the 7 moons of Glorb, gasped Corporal Crete. It's inside them. Precisely. Next Tier's body rippled with academic excitement. Unlike our sensible external protection, humans have their hard parts on the inside, covered by a thin, easily punctured layer they call skin. This skin can be damaged by something as simple as thin paper. Yet they're considered dangerous, asked Sergeant Glorp, a veteran of 3 interstellar conflicts who still had nightmares about facing the dreaded space weasels of Betelgeuse. Commander Vrex K chittered impatiently. The danger, Sergeant, lies in their incomprehensible durability. Observe. The hologram shifted to show footage of humans engaging in various activities. A human falling from a significant height, then getting up. A human continuing to run despite what appeared to be a broken leg. A human surviving temperatures that would freeze a Quarzian solid. Great galaxies, whispered Private Zine, the youngest Marine. Are they immortal? Hardly. Next Tier bubbled. They die quite easily compared to many species. The confounding variable is that they often don't realize they should be dead. Their brains secrete chemicals during danger that essentially convince them they're fine when they're absolutely not. They call it adrenaline, we call it evolutionary insanity. Commander Vrex K clicked his mandibles for attention again. Here's what you need to know for the mission. Humans require constant hydration. Yes, they're mostly water disgusting, I know. They need to shut down for approximately 8 hours a day in a state they call sleep during this time. They're vulnerable. But I strongly advise against poking them while they're dormant. The diplomatic incident of 2347 still has us filling out paperwork. What about their weapons, asked Sergeant Glorp. Primitive but effective, Vrex K responded. They haven't fully embraced gravitic weaponry, preferring instead to fling small metal projectiles at hypersonic velocities. Apparently they find the recoil satisfying. Barbarians. Next Tier oozed forward again. I should also mention their temperature regulation system. When overheated, humans exude salty liquid from millions of tiny holes in their skin. Do not, under any circumstances, comment on this. The diplomatic handbook specifically mentions this as a cultural taboo. Private Zine's antenna twitched nervously. Will they eat us? They are omnivores, Next Tier admitted. But Alliance regulations strictly prohibit the consumption of sentient species during joint operations. There hasn't been an incident since the unfortunate misunderstanding with the lettuce people of Salad Prime. Commander Vrex K's patience visibly waned. Enough theoretical xenobiology. Tomorrow at 0600 ship time, we rendezvous with the human vessel US definitely not compensating for anything. Our mission is to secure a derelict precursor technology cache on Moon LV-426. Alliance intelligence believes this technology could be weaponized, thus our joint task force. Commander Lieutenant Z-Pox asked, why do we need humans for this mission? Rex K's compound eyes gleamed. 2 reasons. First, diplomatic nonsense from high command about inclusivity. Second, and more practically, the moon's atmosphere contains trace elements toxic to Quarzian physiology. The humans can survive there without environmental suits, which gives them tactical advantages in certain scenarios, like being walking biohazard, someone muttered from the back row. I heard that. Private Squish Rex K snapped. That's exactly the attitude that got you demoted last solar cycle. Remember, these humans are our allies. Terrifying, possibly psychotic allies with internal skeletons and leaky skin, but allies nonetheless. The briefing continued with operational details, equipment specifications, and emergency protocols specifically designed for interspecies cooperation. By the end, the Quarzian Marines felt marginally less horrified at the prospect of working alongside creatures that routinely survived conditions that would kill any sensible species. As the briefing concluded, Commander Rex K offered one final piece of advice: whatever you do, don't mention their primitive binary reproductive system. Last diplomatic envoy who brought that up ended up with something called a wedgie. We're still not entirely sure what happened, but he hasn't sat comfortably since. The docking procedure between the Quarzian vessel and the human ship took precisely 3 hours longer than scheduled, primarily because the human pilot insisted on doing it manually rather than letting the automated systems handle it. Commander Rex K's mandibles hadn't stopped twitching in annoyance since. They enjoy. Handling their joystick, science officer next tier explained diplomatically, a gelatinous form rippling with discomfort at having to translate the concept. When the airlock finally cycled open, the assembled Quarzian Marines stood at perfect attention, exoskeletons polished to a mirror shine. What emerged from the human vessel was not what they expected. First through the door was a human female who stood barely taller than the average Quarzian. Her hair was cropped short, and a jagged scar ran across her left cheek. The name Jackson was emblazoned across her chest armor. Captain Maxine Jackson, Earth Special Forces, she announced with a quick salute. We're the Helldivers. Sorry about the docking delay. Lieutenant Cooper thinks computers take all the fun out of flying. Commander Rex K's translator struggled with the concept of Helldivers, rendering it as beings who voluntarily enter thermal punishment realm. He clicked his mandibles in what he hoped was a diplomatic manner. Commander Rex K of the 7th Quarzian Peacekeeping Battalion. We welcome you aboard the Inevitable Cultural Misunderstanding. Captain Jackson's mouth twitched upward. Great ship name. Very prophetic. Behind her, 4 more humans filed through the airlock, each more terrifying than the last. The Quarzian Marines instinctively took a synchronized step backward. My team, Jackson said, gesturing to each in turn. Lieutenant Cooper, our pilot and tech specialist. Cooper was tall and lanky, with a perpetual smirk that suggested he found the universe's cosmic joke hilarious and was just waiting for everyone else to get it. He carried what appeared to be an ancient computational device that Next Tier later identified as a Nintendo Switch. Sergeant Dominguez, weapons. Dominguez was built like a Krelvian war tank, arms the size of Quarzian torsos, with a completely shaved head covered in colorful markings that Rex K initially mistook for battle paint, but were apparently tattoos, the voluntary permanent skin alterations that humans underwent for aesthetic purposes. Corporal Chen, our medic. Chen appeared deceptively delicate compared to her squadmates, with intelligent eyes that seemed to be cataloguing every Quarzian physiological weakness within line of sight. And this, Jackson said with a hint of caution in her voice, is Specialist First Class Murphy. Murphy looked normal for a human. Average height, average build, reddish-brown hair, and an expression of casual boredom. Nothing about him suggested why Captain Jackson had introduced him with such careful emphasis. Private Zine leaned toward Sergeant Glorp and whispered, "That one doesn't look so dangerous." Captain Jackson overheard. Murphy has what we call on Earth interesting luck. His previous 3 squads were all reassigned after incidents. I don't have bad luck, Murphy protested, speaking for the first time. His voice was surprisingly melodic. I have statistically improbable luck. There's a difference. He fell through the deck plating on our last ship, Lieutenant Cooper added helpfully. Engineers said it was structurally impossible. Murphy found a way. It's a gift, Murphy shrugged. Commander Rex K's antennae twitched nervously. Perhaps we should proceed to the mission briefing room. As they walked through the corridors of the Quarzian vessel, cultural misunderstandings blossomed like toxic flowers on Rigel VII. Corporal Crete made the mistake of asking why humans required such bulky armaments when their natural durability was so renowned. Sergeant Dominguez responded by demonstrating how quickly he could field strip and reassemble his sidearm, a process that made several Quarzians emit distress pheromones. Meanwhile, Science Officer Next Tier hovered uncomfortably close to Corporal Chen, bombarding her with questions about human medical practices. So you actually cut them open? To fix them? And they survive this? Usually Chen replied with a shrug. Depends how long they've been broken. Fascinating, Next Tier bubbled. Your species treats your bodies like malfunctioning equipment. That's actually pretty accurate, Chen admitted. At the front of the procession, Captain Jackson engaged in what passed for diplomatic small talk with Commander Vrex K. So your species molts her? That must be inconvenient during missions. Vrex K's breathing sacs inflated with indignation. We schedule our biological processes appropriately, Captain. Unlike humans, who I understand need to expel waste multiple times daily. Jackson conceded. The true disaster occurred when they reached the ship's mess hall. Lieutenant Zepox, attempting to demonstrate cross-species hospitality, offered refreshments. Would our human allies care for some nutrient paste? It's fortified with calcium carbonate for exoskeleton health. Murphy, clearly not paying attention, reached for the offered tube. Sure, I could eat. Before anyone could stop him, he squeezed a generous portion into his mouth. There was a moment of horrified silence as the Quarzians realized a diplomatic incident was imminent. Murphy chewed thoughtfully. Tastes like Taco Bell, he finally declared. Not bad. Next Tier's entire gelatinous form turned a shocked shade of purple. Impossible. That compound would cause severe intestinal distress in most carbon-based lifeforms. Murphy's digestive system is classified as a biological weapon in 3-star systems, Cooper explained. We're still not sure if it's natural selection, or just Murphy's luck at work. Captain Jackson stepped in before further dietary exchanges could occur. We should probably review the mission parameters before tomorrow's deployment. Commander Vrex K agreed hastily, mentally calculating how much paperwork he'd need to file if Murphy's consumption of Quarzian nutrient paste resulted in an interstellar incident. As they continued toward the briefing room, Specialist Murphy fell into step beside Private Zine, the youngest Quarzian Marine. First joint species mission, Murphy asked conversationally. Zine's antennae twitched in affirmation. Is it true that humans continue fighting even when injured? Murphy grinned. Oh, you have no idea. Wait until you see what happens when we get a paper cut. The cursing alone violates 17 intergalactic peace treaties. Private Zine couldn't tell if the human was joking, which seemed to be a recurring problem when dealing with these Deathworlders. They said terrifying things with pleasant facial expressions, making it impossible to gauge the appropriate level of horror. What none of the Quarzians realized yet was that Murphy wasn't just making conversation. He was busy living up to his reputation, having already spotted 3 different ways the upcoming mission could go catastrophically wrong. It wasn't pessimism, just probability mathematics as applied by whatever cosmic force had decided to make Murphy its favorite plaything. Yeah, and Murphy's calculations rarely missed. The surface of Moon LV-426 looked like what would happen if a volcanic wasteland and an Arctic tundra had a particularly ugly baby. Jagged black rock formations jutted through fields of pale blue ice, while a thin atmosphere of nitrogen and methane created a perpetual purplish haze. The 2 suns in the distant sky cast competing shadows that seemed to move with unnatural speed. Cheery Place Lieutenant Cooper remarked as the joint team disembarked from their shuttle. Reminds me of my ex's apartment. Commander Vrex K's environmental suit hissed as it adjusted to the planet's minimal atmosphere. The Quarzian Marines were each enclosed in sleek exoskeletons designed to protect their already considerable natural armor from the toxic elements present in LV-426's atmosphere. The humans, meanwhile, wore what appeared to be laughably inadequate protection by comparison lightweight tactical gear with only partial face coverings. Are you certain your species can tolerate these conditions? Vrex K asked Captain Jackson, unable to keep the concern from his voice. His diplomatic training hadn't covered what to do if your ally spontaneously dissolved. Jackson checked her environmental readings. Atmosphere's thin but breathable. Temps about -20°C. Bit nippy, but nothing we can't handle. Nippy next tier repeated from within her specialized hover bubble. Your species classifies potentially lethal temperature conditions as nippy. Wait till she hears about Chicago in January, Sergeant Dominguez muttered. The mission briefing had been straightforward. A precursor artifact vault had been detected approximately 3 kilometers from their landing site. Intelligence suggested it contained technology that predated most known civilizations. The joint team was to secure the site, assess the artifacts, and prepare them for extraction. Standard archaeological recovery operation with military escort, nothing they hadn't done dozens of times before. Except, of course, for Murphy being there. They moved in formation across the treacherous terrain, Quarzians on the flanks, humans taking point and rear guard. Private Zine found himself assigned to Shadow Specialist Murphy, a duty he suspected was Commander Rex K's idea of a practical joke. Your exosuits look uncomfortable, Murphy commented as they navigated around a particularly sharp rock formation. All those extra limbs to coordinate. Zine's translator took a moment to process this. We find your lack of appropriate extremities equally disturbing. How do you function with only 4 limbs? Pretty well until we lose one, Murphy replied cheerfully. Then we manage with 3. The casual reference to dismemberment sent a shudder through Zine's primary nervous system. The first sign of trouble came 2 kilometers into their trek. Lieutenant Cooper, who had been monitoring their surroundings with a handheld scanner, suddenly stopped. Captain, I'm picking up energy readings that weren't in the briefing. Captain Jackson frowned. Source, scattered. And moving Cooper's usually smirking face had gone serious. Pattern suggests artificial intelligence. Commander Rex K's mandibles clicked in agitation. The precursors were not known to leave active defense systems. Yeah, well, someone forgot to tell the defense systems that, Cooper replied, just as his scanner emitted a high-pitched warning tone. Murphy sighed. And here we go. What happened next would later be described in 17 different ways in the after-action reports. The Quarzian version involved unexpected hostile autonomous units, while the human report simply stated robot ambush, because of course there were robots. They erupted from the ice sleek, insectoid machines with multiple limbs ending in various unpleasant-looking implements. Their carapaces gleamed with the same purplish hue as the atmosphere, making them nearly invisible until they moved. Defensive formation, Captain Jackson and Commander Rex K shouted simultaneously. The Quarzian Marines immediately formed a perfect circle, their particle weapons humming to life. The humans, to Zine's horror, did not follow any recognizable tactical pattern. Instead, they scattered like startled prey, which seemed counterintuitive until Zine realized they were positioning themselves to create crossfire zones. The first wave of machines charged toward them with unnerving silence. Particle beams and human projectile weapons created a cacophony of destruction. Several machines fell, their limbs twitching with residual energy. These aren't precursor tech, Corporal Chen shouted over the din. Design is all wrong, too new. Someone's been shopping in the ancient alien vault, Cooper called back, his fingers flying over his tactical pad, attempting to hack into the machine's control systems. For several minutes it seemed the joint force might repel the ambush with minimal casualties. The Quarzians' natural armor and environmental suits proved effective against the machine's energy weapons, while the humans demonstrated disturbing efficiency with their primitive ballistic technology. Then Murphy's luck made its grand entrance. One of the larger machines, approximately the size of a small transport vehicle, suddenly burst from beneath the ice directly under Murphy's position. Its emergence created a shockwave that sent several team members flying, including Private Zine. As Zine struggled to right himself, his compound eyes captured what happened next in horrifying detail. Murphy, thrown into the air, somehow managed to twist his body midway through his arc and land in a controlled roll. He came up firing, his weapon tearing into the machine's sensory array. The machine responded by lashing out with a limb that ended in what appeared to be a superheated cutting tool. Murphy dodged almost. The machine's appendage caught him across the upper arm, just below the shoulder. There was a moment of sickening clarity as everyone present realized what had happened. The machine's cutting tool had sliced clean through Murphy's right arm. The limb, still clutching his weapon, tumbled across the icy ground while arterial spray painted a vivid crimson arc across the pale blue ice. The Quarzians froze in collective horror. In their cultural understanding, such catastrophic damage meant only one thing: imminent death. What happened instead would become legendary in Quarzian military training for generations. Murphy looked down at the stump where his arm had been, blinked twice, and said in a conversational tone, "Well, that's inconvenient." Then, to the absolute astonishment of every Quarzian present, he pulled his sidearm with his remaining hand and shot the machine directly in what passed for its central processing unit. The mechanical assailant collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. Blood continued to pump from Murphy's wound at a rate that Nextier's medical database indicated was critically unsustainable by all biological logic. The human should be entering terminal shock. Instead, Murphy called out, "Hey Doc, gonna need the good stuff." Corporal Chen was already sprinting toward him, her medical kit open. "On it. Somebody cover us." Captain Jackson barked orders while firing continuously. "Dominguez, Cooper suppression fire. Vrex K, we need to move to that ridge for better position." The Quarzian Marines remained momentarily paralyzed, their combat programming struggling to reconcile the impossible scene: a mortally wounded teammate continuing to function as though missing a quarter of their body was merely a tactical inconvenience. It was Commander Vrex K who broke their stupor. "You heard the captain. Defensive positions around the wounded human." As the battle raged on, Corporal Chen worked on Murphy's catastrophic injury with terrifying efficiency. She applied a tourniquet, injected multiple substances into his remaining arm, and sprayed the wound with something that expanded into a hardened foam. Throughout the procedure, Murphy remained conscious, occasionally offering suggestions. "There's a spare power pack in my left pocket if you need it for the cauterizer," he noted, as casually as if directing someone to condiments at a dinner table. Private Zine, who had managed to rejoin the defensive perimeter, couldn't tear his compound eyes away from the surreal medical intervention happening amid the chaos of battle. Is the human going to survive?" he asked Lieutenant Zepox. The lieutenant's mandibles clicked in what might have been awe or terror. "I don't think anyone has informed the human that he shouldn't." The battle raged for another 17 minutes before the last of the mechanical assailants collapsed into sparking heaps. In the eerie silence that followed, the only sounds were the hiss of Quarzian environmental suits, the soft beeping of human tactical equipment, and Specialist Murphy humming what sounded suspiciously like "Always look on the bright side of life." This last detail caused Science Officer Nextier's hover bubble to wobble precariously as her gelatinous form contracted in disbelief. "The human is producing recreational audio vibrations," she reported to Commander Vrex K, her voice modulator unable to fully convey her astonishment, despite catastrophic limb separation. Captain Jackson approached her traumatically dismembered team member with the air of someone dealing with a minor scheduling inconvenience. "Status, Murphy." Murphy, now propped against a rock formation with his arm stump elevated and sealed with the medical foam, gave what the Quarzians would later describe as an inappropriate facial muscle arrangement, but what humans would recognize as a lopsided grin. "All things considered." "Not bad," he replied. "Chen pumped me full of the good stuff. Can't feel a thing from the shoulder down, or where the shoulder down used to be." "Blood pressure?" Jackson asked Corporal Chen, who was monitoring Murphy's vitals on a compact medical scanner. "Stabilizing at 100/65. He's lost approximately 1.2 liters," Chen reported clinically. "I've administered synthetic plasma expanders, coagulants, broad-spectrum antibiotics, and pain management." Lieutenant Cooper had retrieved Murphy's severed arm and was examining it with unsettling fascination. "Think we can reattach it? It's still got your lucky lighter in the hand." "Nah," Murphy sighed. "Cauterization sealed the deal. Besides, that cutting tool flash heated the tissue. Would be more trouble than it's worth." Cooper nodded sagely. "Fair enough. Want me to get the lighter out at least?" "Yeah, pry it from my cold, dead fingers." "Well, warm, dead fingers in this case." This exchange proved too much for Private Zine, who emitted an involuntary distress chirp that echoed within his environmental suit. Murphy glanced over at the young Quarzian. "You okay there, bug buddy? You're looking a bit. What's the word for it, Chen?" "Catatonic," the medic supplied without looking up from her scanner. "That's it. You're looking a bit catatonic, Private. Commander Rex Kerr finally found his voice. Specialist Murphy, our medical protocols dictate immediate evacuation for injuries of this magnitude. We must return you to the shuttle. Murphy blinked. What? And abort the mission. It's just an arm. Just an arm, Lieutenant Zepox's translator nearly shorted out from the volume. You've lost 25% of your limbs. More like 20% if you count fingers and toes, as limbs Cooper interjected helpfully. Captain Jackson raised a hand, silencing further debate. Murphy, realistic assessment. Can you continue? The injured specialist considered this with what appeared to be genuine thought, rather than bravado. Bleeding stopped. Pains managed. I'm right-handed, but I can shoot left. Might need help carrying anything heavy, but otherwise. He shrugged his remaining shoulder and winced slightly. ... Don operational. Science officer next tier's hover bubble drifted closer, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her horror. I must understand this physiological response. By all standard metrics, you should be in hypovolemic shock, experiencing severe trauma response including disorientation, elevated heart rate, and decreased consciousness. Murphy grinned. Oh, I'm definitely in shock. But humans have this neat trick we can compartmentalize. Right now, my brain's filed this under problems for future Murphy and is focusing on current Murphy needs to help complete the mission. Also, Corporal Chen added, I gave him enough synthetic adrenaline to make a horse run a marathon. And morphine. Lots of morphine. Sergeant Dominguez, who had been securing the perimeter, rejoined the group. We need to move. Those machines were sending signals. More could be coming. Commander Rex K's mandibles clicked in agitation. His training had never covered how to proceed when an ally suffered catastrophic injury, yet insisted on continuing the mission. The Quarzian military had very clear protocols about battlefield injuries. If a soldier lost a limb, they were evacuated immediately for regenerative treatment. But humans didn't have regenerative capabilities, did they? According to the briefing materials, human limbs didn't grow back, which made Murphy's cavalier attitude even more incomprehensible. Perhaps Rex K suggested, trying to sound reasonable, one of our team could escort Specialist Murphy back to the shuttle while the rest continue the mission. Murphy was already pushing himself to his feet, wobbling momentarily before finding his balance. Commander, I appreciate the concern, but with all due respect, that's a waste of resources. Besides, I've always wanted to try the one-armed bandit routine. None of the Quarzians' translators could make sense of this last statement. Captain Jackson made the executive decision. Murphy stays with us. Chen will monitor his condition. If his vitals drop below acceptable parameters, then we reassess. Commander Rex Kerr, do you have objections? The Quarzian commander's compound eyes swiveled between Jackson's resolute expression and Murphy's blood-spattered but determined face. How could he explain that allowing a gravely wounded soldier to continue was anathema to everything Quarzian military doctrine taught? That it struck at the core of their societal values regarding care for the injured? But there was something else, to a growing sense that he was witnessing something his training had never prepared him for. A demonstration of, what was that human phrase? Ah, yes, stubborn idiocy. Or was it something else entirely? Very well, he conceded. But Private Zine will assist Specialist Murphy. Zine's antennae shot up in alarm. Commander. Consider it a learning opportunity, Private Rex K replied, with what passed for Quarzian humor. As they prepared to continue their journey toward the precursor vault, the Quarzian Marines watched in fascinated horror as Corporal Chen performed additional treatment on Murphy's wound. She removed the temporary foam sealant, revealing the cauterized stump, and began applying some kind of spray on synthetic skin. This will keep environmental contaminants out, she explained to a visibly nauseated Zine. The nerve block I've administered should last about 6 hours. After that, well, let's just say we want to be back on the shuttle by then. Fascinating field medicine, next tier commented, hovering closer than was strictly comfortable for anyone involved. Your species has clearly optimized trauma care for continued combat effectiveness rather than long-term recovery. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, Chen replied cryptically. When all you have are soldiers who won't stop fighting until they're dead, you develop medicine that keeps them going as long as possible. Meanwhile, Murphy was allowing Zine to help him adjust his tactical harness to compensate for his missing limb. The young Quarzian worked with trembling claws, still unable to fully process what he was witnessing. "Does it? Does it hurt?" Zine finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Murphy considered this. "You know when you shed your exoskeleton? That itchy, uncomfortable feeling." Zine clicked affirmatively. "It's nothing like that. Imagine if your entire exoskeleton suddenly vanished from one section of your body, exposing all the sensitive parts underneath to the air. Then imagine someone poured molten metal on that spot to seal it up. That's closer." Zine's compound eyes widened in horror. But then Murphy continued cheerfully, "Imagine your medic gives you drugs so good you start thinking that maybe having 3 limbs instead of 4 is actually a tactical advantage because you present a smaller target profile." "That doesn't sound like rational thought processing," Zine observed. "Welcome to human psychology under extreme stress," Murphy replied with a wink. "We're really good at convincing ourselves that everything is fine when it absolutely isn't." As if to demonstrate this point, Murphy attempted to give a thumbs up with his missing hand, realized his mistake, laughed, and gave the thumbs up with his remaining hand instead. The Quarzian Marines exchanged glances laden with new understanding humans weren't merely durable. They were, by any reasonable definition, completely insane. The precursor vault turned out to be a partially buried structure resembling a massive geometric tumor growing from the moon's surface. Its entrance, a hexagonal doorway twice the height of Sergeant Dominguez, was sealed with what appeared to be a solid slab of iridescent material. "Classic precursor design," Lieutenant Cooper observed, scanning the door with his handheld device. "No visible locking mechanism, no control panel, probably keyed to some biological signature that's been extinct for 50 million years. "Can you open it?" Captain Jackson asked. Cooper shrugged. "Maybe. Might take a few hours of." Murphy lurched forward. "Let me try something." Before anyone could stop him, the one-armed specialist staggered to the door and firmly kicked the bottom right corner with his boot. The entire door shuddered, then silently slid into the floor. The assembled team stared in disbelief. What Murphy said defensively. "Old trick. Precursor tech always has a mechanical override somewhere in the lower quadrant. It's in the briefing materials." "It most certainly was not," Commander Vrex K stated. "Oh. Must have been from my last assignment then." Captain Jackson pinched the bridge of her nose. "Murphy, did you previously encounter precursor technology that wasn't in your service record?" "Classified," Murphy replied with a wink that made his captain sigh deeply. As they entered the vault, the Quarzian Marines maintained perfect formation, despite their growing unease. Private Zine stayed close to Murphy, partially out of duty and partially because watching the injured human had become a morbidly fascinating experience. "How's the arm?" "I mean the not arm," Zine asked. Starting to throb a bit, Murphy admitted quietly. "Chen's wonder drugs are wearing thin around the edges. But I'm managing." The interior of the vault opened into a vast chamber filled with pedestals, each displaying artifacts of varying sizes and apparent functions. The walls were covered in swirling patterns that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. "Jackpot," Cooper whispered, his scanner going wild. "Energy signatures everywhere." Science officer next to his hover bubble quivered with academic excitement. "These artifacts appear to be computational devices of incredible complexity. If we could decipher even one." "Stick to the mission parameters," Commander Vrex K reminded everyone. "We secure the site, catalog the findings, and prepare for extraction. No unauthorized interactions with potentially dangerous technology." No sooner had these words left his mandibles than a loud crash echoed through the chamber. All eyes turned to see Murphy, who had apparently attempted to examine an artifact one-handed and dropped it. "Sorry," he winced. "Depth perception's a bit off." The fallen artifact, a spherical object roughly the size of a human head, began to emit a soft humming sound. Then it split open like a blooming flower, revealing an inner core that pulsed with blue-green light. "Nobody move," Captain Jackson ordered. Murphy, proving once again that following orders was merely a suggestion to him, crouched down beside the activated artifact. "I think it's scanning the room. Probably some kind of security system." As if confirming his assessment, beams of light shot out from the device, sweeping across every being present. When the light touched Murphy's missing arm site, It paused, then intensified. Captain Murphy said, his voice uncharacteristically tense. I think it's interested in my modification. Before anyone could respond, additional beams shot from the ceiling, creating a three-dimensional grid around the injured specialist. Murphy froze as the light concentrated around his cauterized shoulder stump. Chen, Captain Jackson called, her hand hovering near her weapon. The medic was already checking her scanner. His vitals are elevating but still within acceptable parameters. Whatever it's doing, it's not killing him. Yet. How reassuring, Murphy muttered. Commander Rex K signaled his Marines to ready their weapons, but Captain Jackson raised a hand. Wait. Look. The light around Murphy's injury was changing color, shifting from blue-green to a golden hue. Where it touched his sealed wound, tiny particles began to coalesce, forming what looked like a scaffold of shimmering material. It's building something, next, Tier observed in fascination. Murphy grimaced. Whatever it's doing, it's starting to hurt like a... The rest of his sentence devolved into creative profanity that the Quarzians' translators wisely declined to process. For 3 excruciating minutes, the precursor technology continued its work while Murphy went through what Captain Jackson would later describe in her report as involuntary stress testing of human pain thresholds. His face grew increasingly pale, sweat pouring down his forehead, but he remained conscious and upright through what appeared to be sheer stubbornness. Private Zine clicked his mandibles in distress. Should we not help him? And interfere with ancient technology we don't understand, Cooper replied. That's how you get disintegrated in creative ways. Finally, the light receded. Where Murphy's stump had been, there was now a gleaming, semi-transparent structure in the rough shape of a human arm. It wasn't solid, more like a golden wireframe with occasional pulses of light running through it. Murphy stared at it in disbelief. Then, cautiously, he attempted to move what wasn't there. The energy construct responded, flexing like fingers. Well, he said weakly, that's new. Precursor prosthetic technology, next Tier bubbled, her gelatinous form practically vibrating with excitement. The vault must have medical capabilities designed to repair damaged biological entities. Murphy experimentally reached out with his new energy appendage toward a small artifact on a nearby pedestal. The golden fingers passed through the solid object at first, but when he concentrated, they became substantial enough to lift it. He said. Guess I'm part ghost now. The next hour proceeded with surprising efficiency. The team catalogued the most important artifacts, with Murphy using his new energy appendage to handle objects that required careful manipulation. Despite occasional winces and the worrying pallor of his skin, he worked tirelessly, demonstrating a level of functionality that the Quarzian Marines found increasingly difficult to reconcile with their understanding of biological limitations. The human continues to operate at 78% efficiency, despite traumatic injury, Lieutenant Zepox remarked to Commander Rex K. Our best warriors manage perhaps 40% after similar damage. Rex K's compound eyes tracked Murphy as he used his energy arm to reach through a force field that had stymied their efforts to access a particularly important artifact. I'm beginning to understand why Alliance Command insisted on including humans in this mission, the commander admitted. Their adaptability is unsettling but undeniably useful. When the final artifact had been secured and prepared for transport, Captain Jackson approached Murphy, who was now visibly swaying on his feet. We're done here. Specialist. Medical assessment. Murphy's grin was more of a grimace. I've been better, Captain. Energy arm is cool, but whatever it's doing is draining me faster than a cheap battery. Chen's painkillers are definitely filing for retirement. Mission complete, she said firmly. You've done enough, Murphy. For the first time since losing his arm, Murphy didn't argue. Which, to everyone who knew him, was the most alarming sign yet. The medical bay of the GSV Inevitable Cultural Misunderstanding had never hosted such an unprecedented collection of beings. Around Specialist Murphy's recovery pod stood a semicircle of Quarzian Marines, their exoskeletons polished to a nervous shine. They resembled nothing so much as giant, militarized insects attending the world's most awkward cocktail party. Is this a visitation or an invasion? Murphy asked weakly from his bed. The energy arm had dissolved shortly after they returned to the ship, leaving him properly one-armed again. His complexion had improved from imminent corpse to merely severely underslept human, which Corporal Chen assured everyone was significant progress. Commander Vrex K stepped forward, mandibles clicking in what the humans had come to recognize as the Quarzian version of throat clearing. "The medical staff informs us you are expected to survive," he stated, making it sound like this outcome defied mathematical probability. Disappointed Murphy grinned. Astounded, the commander corrected, "Our xenobiologists are still analyzing your medical data. They have used the phrase statistically impossible 17 times in their preliminary report." Captain Jackson, seated beside Murphy's bed, snorted. "That's Murphy's middle name." Science officer next tier's hover bubble drifted closer. "We have questions about your species' pain response mechanisms. For research purposes. And I have morphine for pain response purposes," Murphy replied cheerfully. "Ask away, but no promises the answers will make sense." Private Zine, who had barely spoken since their return, suddenly chittered in the Quarzian equivalent of blurting out an embarrassing question. "Why didn't you die?" The medical bay fell silent. Captain Jackson raised an eyebrow but didn't intervene. This was clearly a teaching moment. Murphy considered the question with surprising seriousness. "Honestly, partly training, partly drugs, mostly spite." Spite, Zine's translator struggled with the concept. A human emotional response Lieutenant Cooper supplied from where he lounged against a nearby wall. "When the universe tries to kill you, you stay alive out of sheer stubbornness just to annoy it." Sergeant Dominguez nodded sagely. "My grandmother lived to 103 because she refused to give her neighbor the satisfaction of outliving her." The Quarzians collectively tilted their heads, their compound eyes reflecting bewilderment. "What about the precursor energy appendage?" Commander Vrex K asked, steering the conversation back to slightly more comprehensible territory. "Our scientists detected no residual energy signatures." Murphy shrugged his remaining shoulder. "Gone. Probably just a temporary patch job. Maybe the precursors never figured out permanent prosthetics either." Or perhaps next tier suggested it was designed to facilitate immediate function until proper medical care could be administered. "The precursors may have valued battlefield continuity as your species does." Murphy grinned. "I like that theory. Makes me feel connected to ancient space history instead of just lucky." "There is nothing just about your luck," Murphy, Captain Jackson said dryly. "Alliance Command is already preparing commendations for the mission's success. Apparently, recovering functional precursor artifacts is rare enough that they're willing to overlook the arms situation." "Generous of them," Murphy replied. "Think they'll spring for a decent prosthetic?" "Already approved," Jackson confirmed. "Top-of-the-line military grade with neural interface. It'll be better than the original." Private Zine's antennae twitched in confusion. "You will replace the Lin with technology?" "Not. Regrow it." The humans exchanged looks. "Human limbs don't grow back," Zine Corporal Chen explained gently. This revelation sent a wave of chittering through the assembled Quarzians. Their translator units struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire commentary, but phrases like permanent damage and lifetime adaptation filtered through. Commander Vrex K's mandibles clicked sharply, silencing his troops. "I believe I speak for all Quarzian forces when I say our understanding of human resilience was incomplete." "Hey, no worries," Murphy said. "Our understanding of your species' ability to coordinate 6 limbs simultaneously is pretty impressive too. But we are designed for it," Vrex K countered. "You improvise with whatever remains." Something about this observation struck the humans as profoundly funny. Captain Jackson tried and failed to suppress a smile. Cooper snorted loudly, and even the normally stoic Dominguez chuckled. "That's humanity in a nutshell," Commander Jackson said. "We improvise with whatever remains." 2 weeks later, Commander Vrex K submitted his final mission report to Quarzian High Command. The appendix contained his formal recommendation that the briefing materials regarding humans be substantially revised. The updated briefing, distributed to all Quarzian forces 3 months later, included a new section titled Physiological Resilience Field Observations. It opened with a statement that would become infamous in xenobiology circles. "When assessing human combat effectiveness after injury, do not trust appearances. A human missing 25% of their limbs should be treated as 100% dangerous, albeit more irritable than usual. In the officers' lounge of the GSV Inevitable Cultural Misunderstanding, Lieutenant Z. Pox read this passage aloud to appreciative clicks from his fellow officers. Their mandibles vibrated with newfound respect as they watched the accompanying training video footage from their mission showing Murphy continuing to function after catastrophic injury. I heard Private Zine said from his newly promoted position at the junior officers' table that he's back on active duty with his new arm. Apparently he requested special modifications so it can operate independently while he sleeps. Science officer next tier's gelatinous form rippled with what might have been amusement. The most terrifying aspect is not that he survived such trauma. It's that by human standards, he's entirely average. But Commander Vrex Kerr, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. The Alliance Xenopsychology Division has added a new designation to their classification of sapient species. He paused for dramatic effect, his breathing sacs inflating. Humans are now officially categorized as Deathworlders with Chronic Optimism Disorder. The room erupted in chittering laughter. I asked Specialist Murphy about this designation when we last communicated. Vrex K continued. His response was simply, sounds about right. We're too stubborn to accept limitations and too dumb to know when we're beaten. Lieutenant Z. Pox's antennae twitched curiously. And what did you reply, Commander? Vrex K's compound eyes gleamed with uncharacteristic warmth. I told him that in our next joint mission, I would prefer he keep all his limbs attached. Paperwork is much simpler that way. In the vast database of the Galactic Alliance, one file was permanently flagged with a warning symbol recognized across all member species. It simply read, "Humans, when wounded, they don't die. They just get annoyed. Proceed accordingly."